Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece Chapter 1082 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Buggy fans, and let's just be honest, One Piece fans in general are losing their minds right now. Although I don't really think that it's a surprise, or for most people it shouldn't be a surprise, seeing confirmation is just a glorious thing. Right now, you know, you gotta sort of reorient your brain a little bit because we've been thinking about the Yonko in a certain way for a long time. Maybe you still consider Whitebeard to be a Yonko, but Whitebeard is dead and gone. Same thing now with Big Mom and Kaido. Like, I don't think Big Mom is dead. Kaido, I don't even want to talk about Kaido, right? But in terms of Yonko, they're not Yonko anymore. We have new ones. We're talking about Luffy, Blackbeard, Shanks, and Buggy. These are your four Yonko. No matter how complicated or diverse the story has become, break it down to its simplest level, it's a story about pirates, and these are our four greatest living pirates right now as far as the world is concerned. You may be tempted to trash Buggy, I understand. We are not the world, okay? We've actually followed these journeys and we understand Buggy, Yonko in terms of strength, absolutely not. Even in-game, like maybe his fruit awakens and something absurdly broken, I actually wouldn't be surprised to see that. That being said, I still don't think he's going toe-to-toe with anybody else, but it does not matter. He is a Yonko and we're building up to the end. We're building up to finding Laugh-Tale in the One Piece, and Buggy is going to be a part of that. This chapter was your promise. But I said at the beginning, like, Buggy fans are obviously rejoicing. I don't know if I'd consider myself to be a Buggy fan necessarily, but if you guys are out there, congratulations on your feast. But, you know, it's not just Buggy, man. It's One Piece fans in general. Because, you know, I think right now, more than any other character in the story, Buggy represents One Piece. His successes are the successes of the story itself. Like, what do I mean? When you're talking about things that you would compare to One Piece, in my opinion, and, you know, probably keep this to manga, long-running shonen sort of things, it's like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Gintama, right? Because One Piece is, first and foremost, its backbone, the singular thing that you should be taking away from it on a chapter-by-chapter basis is it is a meme, it is a joke, it is made to make you laugh. Oda is hammering this in over your head repeatedly recently. The secret island no one can find is called Laugh-Tale. Our main character is a reincarnation of an all-powerful godlike figure in the past named Joy Boy, right? One Piece is about laughs. And through this 25-year adventure, we've obviously, jokes have come and passed, but rising from the ashes of all jokes is the meme himself, Buggy. He has come to represent that aspect of One Piece, in my opinion. I suppose you could throw Usopp in there, right? But we're just talking big for the sake of it. You know, but that's just what One Piece is. It's really interesting to talk about as well. Like, you guys know that I've written my own story, and I'm definitely influenced by One Piece. I consider myself to be a huge One Piece fan, so of course in my story I try to make you laugh. But one thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is it's unique to have this be like the backbone of your story. One Piece does a lot of things exceptionally well, and I think that it confuses people sometimes. You know, like, you get to those heart-wrenching moments in One Piece, and I personally, those are my favorite moments in the story, you know? And it's not just like, Oda just doesn't do laughs well. You could absolutely be following One Piece for power scaling, or for world building, or for philosophy even. But to Oda, everything comes secondary to a good joke. Or what he perceives as a good joke, right? Subjective. But anyway, as I was saying, as I was writing my story, it just, you know, it makes things a little bit clearer, right? Like, I'm not the ideal One Piece fan. It's kind of weird to say I'm a huge One Piece fan. I talk about it, you know, every time a new chapter comes out and dedicated hours upon hours of thoughts to it. But I'm still not an ideal One Piece fan because, you know, it's like, the truth is that I like some of these other elements of One Piece within One Piece a little bit more. Not that I don't enjoy the jokes, but I do like it a little bit more, and it comes across in my own story. Yes, jokes are there, and I like that part of it, but it's not what carries it. Kind of like I just said here, my favorite parts of One Piece are where the heart-wrenching moments, right? That's the driving force of my story, at least emotionally. So sometimes I absolutely have to remind myself to be patient. That what I'm really looking forward to isn't necessarily going to come when I want it to. You can also look at this from like a power scaling perspective, because there's a huge community of people that are interested in shonen manga, period, because of power scaling. And the frank truth is that power scaling does matter in One Piece, and it is successfully executed on many occasions, but when it comes to jokes, Oda will defer to jokes if the two are in conflict. This pretty much sums up the reaction to, like, for instance, Big Mom in the story, right? There was a lot of people that really disliked Big Mom. I thought Big Mom was really interesting. She was also intended to be hilarious, but, you know, for me, she was just really interesting. But for a lot of people, power scaling just totally broke, because you have this Yonko character that's hyped up, that's not treated with respect necessarily. Combat respect. Or like faction relative dynamics. You guys understand what I'm saying, even if you can parse my words and be confused. Big Mom is incredibly individually strong, and yes, it can make sense in the story, but people hope that she would be more competitive as a Yonko with the other Yonko, and bring the intimidating vibe that people come to expect from elite villains in the story. And I do think that it's kind of illuminating to realize, like, the reason why you probably didn't like Big Mom is this element of One Piece is not the thing that you desire most. But like I said, comedy thematically is the backbone. That is what One Piece is. Oda uses his brain to figure out how it can work with more serious power scaling, but it isn't always perfect, seen from that lens. So even if this isn't your favorite element of One Piece, you have to respect the internal consistency. And obviously, you don't even need to make this argument for a lot of One Piece fans, who I would consider to be more like true One Piece fans. Maybe that's the wrong way of phrasing it. More ideal readers. Those who are hanging on to every single moment of the meme. Just the same as potentially you could look at Buggy right now and his relationship with Mihawk and Crocodile, yet they still string him along in the adventure and allow him to be present despite it not really fully being understandable or kind of contrived, right? But it really just doesn't matter. By this point, you should be conditioned, because Oda's done a lot of work to keep the tone consistent, which is honestly a feat by itself, something that I've spent some time thinking about recently so that, you know, I don't fall into these same sorts of traps. But, you know, a friend of mine recently read The Poppy War, which is a pretty critically acclaimed fantasy book, one that I enjoyed a lot. But when you read that as just an example, you go through the first part of the story, and then you get the second part, and it's like, if you separated them and you told somebody that they were two different stories, it would be believable, because they're just so fundamentally different. So like I said, Buggy kind of represents One Piece holding tight to its roots, even as we get to the very end game of the story. It's a guarantee that the end of One Piece is going to feel like the beginning of One Piece. And all throughout, it was always the same, which is an incredible accomplishment. But you know, it's so cool to me that, you know, Buggy is your meme character, and we're having all sorts of laughs at the thought that poor little weak Buggy from chapter 15 in the story is now a Yonko competing for the One Piece, and is going to be an integral part of the endgame. You know, it's a total joke. At the same time, you can think about it more deeply as well, and it says something, which is also another beauty of One Piece. I've said this for a long time, and I could compile panel evidence for you if you really need it. I don't think that many do, but fate, fortune, luck is a part of the story, and Oda emphasizes this at certain critical moments. And Buggy also represents that as well, where, you know, it's not just about personal strength. He's not personally strong. He's an absurd, extreme example of it. But a person like this can also find themselves very near the greatest treasure the world has to offer, with the potential of actually being able to acquire it. In a sense, One Piece tries to teach you to embrace what is possible, right? You know, no matter how improbable your dreams are, set sail, right? And so was it ever likely that someone like Buggy could be where he is now? No. But it do be like that. As they say, better to be lucky than good. This is a theme, and it helps to create, I guess, novel situations. You know, things that I've never seen anywhere ever successfully pulled off. It works because we don't need to suspend our disbelief to believe it. Anyway, I've totally jumped the shark. I thought it was incredible how Oda pieced together Cross Guild, where, you know, at first, why was it Mihawk, Crocodile, and Buggy? That was certainly a question that I asked myself. It seemed kind of random, like a hodgepodge of cool characters from the story that were sort of thrown together. And it's not until this chapter that you see the vision, right? Wealth, fame, and power. Buggy has always only been concerned about acquiring wealth. Between Mihawk and Crocodile, maybe it's a bit more obscure. I think what the chapter was going for is that Mihawk is about power, while Crocodile is about fame. I think that you could potentially flip that and it would also make sense. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that wealth, fame, and power. Goldie Roger left everything, right? So Cross Guild takes 3 individual people that are all interested in one element of it, and together they are complete. The treasure satisfies them all, not just a portion of the treasure. This is so unbelievably genius. Like, straight up, man. It is on another level. And it also highlights in a very different way how the journey for the One Piece involves more than just the captain, right? So in the Straw Hats terms, Luffy needs the Straw Hats to perform duties so that they can actually reach Laugh Tale. Like he says this on multiple occasions. I wouldn't be where I was without my crew. I need them. Well, in this, it's like another way of looking at the same thing. You need Mihawk, Buggy, and Crocodile together to want the One Piece, or else it's not going to happen. And I guess it works on the same level as well, because Buggy wouldn't get anywhere without Mihawk and Crocodile as like his right and left arm, right? Mihawk occupies the role of simply being the strongest, brute force strength, and Crocodile adds a more planning and scheming element to make it possible. But it's a very subtle inversion. The joke, of course, is that Buggy is the captain. The world is going to perceive it that way. They're literally riding a clown ship. I assume it's going to stay the same. But the reality is that all 3 of them are equal captains. And that is the only way that it works. But let's just continue on our train of just, slobbering all over Oda, because it is absolutely required in this chapter. A question that I've had for years now, literal years, is how is a Zoro-Mihawk interaction at the end of the story going to work that Zoro essentially trained under him? There's a lot of people, and I consider myself part of this faction, that thought that Mihawk was going to lose to somebody else, and then Zoro would beat the person that beat Mihawk. So something like Blackbeard's Shiryu defeats Mihawk, then becomes the world's strongest swordsman, so that Zoro can defeat somebody new rather than defeat his mentor. This isn't going to happen anymore. I think this chapter pretty much telegraphs it. I truly understand that not a lot of people are going to appreciate this, but this is one of the single most creative things that Oda has ever done, and it's jaw-dropping, honestly. And it's crazy how simple it is in retrospect. I mean, really, you just needed to add this element of Mihawk desiring the One Piece. It wasn't really clear that he's actually interested in it in this chapter, but I assume that's where we're going with this. Like the wealth, fame, power. Mihawk's going to be entranced by the idea of being able to find the One Piece. And so when we get to Laugh Tale, I assume that Shanks and Blackbeard are going to be there along with Buggy and the Straw Hats. And so a fight is going to be very natural and carry with it, besides who is the strongest swordsman, a lot of gravity. And of course, you pretty much know that this is going to be slanted heavily with Shanks and Luffy. That fight's going to happen too, I think. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I never would have believed you, which kind of just illustrates the monumental dub that Oda's building for himself. But anyway, going back to Cross Guild, I think that the way that it functions as well was also insanely creative and possibly the realest moment in all of One Piece. The idea, and this is brilliant, is that now the pirates are paying people for bounties on Marines. As a side note here, R.I.P. T-Bone, you will be missed. You had one of the best designs in all of One Piece. Saying it now. And kind of the same way that the government did it reverse, where they would pay people with bounties on pirates, creating bounty hunters like Zoro at the beginning of the story. But it turns out, when you do this, there's takers. Essentially people desperate enough that they are forced to try because they don't have any other option. I'm trying to collect my thoughts here, but following the story of the old man at the beginning of this chapter, seeing how his family is starving and the Marines preside over his island, and then we get it from the Marine perspective of how protecting the people is their job. It's important to them, they care about it, but these people that they're protecting are also suffering. They're not protecting them, and that can we word this together? I don't know, man. You understand, right, how intricate and deep that is. The Marines are both protecting and not protecting their subjects. And that created a vulnerability that Buggy and Crocodile geniusly exposed. This man needed money more than he feared the consequences of the laws or pirates themselves. If you want to get really deep here, you could potentially speculate that Oda is alluding to money creating or wealth creating order. Essentially, a just order does not exist with massive wealth inequality. But in the simplest terms possible, if people are too poor to survive, what are they going to do, man? They're going to commit crimes, they're going to steal, whatever it takes. Chaos gains a foothold. And in a sense, I think that it illustrates how naive the Marines are to believe in the system that they defend, while the system itself creates its own enemies. The conflict feeds itself if nobody really addresses the problem. In real-world history, a lot of pirates were poor naval officers or naval crew members who wanted the opportunity to become wealthy. At the very least, you can bet that many don't become pirates if that desire or that want, that dream, isn't first there. In a sense, it's kind of a paradox. The Marine singular goal is to fight pirates to protect the people from piracy. And they're pretty frickin' smug about it. But while doing so, they are defending a system which is creating more pirates from the people. The snake is metaphorically eating its own tail. With this in mind, go ahead and reread the chapter. Tsuru and Sengoku said some things which I think makes this clear. But I suppose I am talking in circles here. Regardless, I think that you gather that I am very interested in analyzing this, and I think that it's worthy of it, and it's just another thing to slap onto an incredible chapter. So let's take some deep breaths here and just try and go over some of the various other things that we learned from the chapter. First off, it does not appear as if Garp is actually a member of SWORD. This could be a translation error. I'll be curious to read the official as well. But they refer to Garp recruiting SWORD, and not that Garp was SWORD. You know, like SWORD is going to help him, not that Garp was SWORD. That's the impression that I got. So the only real takeaway that I would get from this is that if there is some sort of leader of SWORD, it's probably not Garp. Which is an interesting lingering mystery that might have complications on the story. I also mentioned something earlier, and I just want to make sure I clarify. I do think that Cross Guild does make sense. You know, stringing Buggy along, Buggy is the Yonko, and his name carries weight. He also provides some support in terms of, you know, there's people that look up to him that are his crew, you know, his fan club or whatever. So that's why Crocodile and Mihawk are essentially using Buggy, even though Buggy will be the figurehead, which is another thing that, you know, like an undertone of the chapter here that Oda's potentially commenting on. The idea of a clown figurehead and a clown figurehead leader. I will go no further. It's also important to mention that both Crocodile and Mihawk seem to be intent on creating some sort of pirate utopia, pirate kingdom, which really makes me wonder about, you know, how our present storyline relates to the Void Century, or what occurred just before the Void Century as well. Things like the Ancient Kingdom. Are we seeing the seedlings of something like that now? My theory is that both Crocodile and Mihawk are going to come to the conclusion that in order to create this utopia and make it sustainable, they will need the One Piece. And I suppose that we should prepare ourselves that now that Buggy and Cross Guild are contenders, they're going to need to find the road poneglyphs just the same as Blackbeard and Shanks. It's going to be really interesting how Oda decides to do that. But there's two free agents right now that seem like prime candidates to join the movement, okay? And I'm talking about Kid and I'm talking about Law, both of which had previously rode poneglyphs, so maybe. All this Cross Guild stuff has me just thinking about the Void Century in general, and I just wonder if a lot of pieces of like the concepts which comprise its existence tells us something about the past. I find it to be the best example so far of the pirate world organizing itself. They want to create a country. They're now paying people to maintain their version of order. I have a theory that the world government that we know today actually was created by pirates. That Joy Boy never actually lost, and the government that formed after the Ancient Kingdom's defeat was made essentially with his blessing. The central idea being that the world of pirates is incredibly dangerous, and Joy Boy was the king, but he didn't know what would happen after his death, so he needed to create a system which could manage them. To avoid a Blackbeard or a Big Mom or a Kaido-type pirate from becoming king and destroying the world. The idea of restricting freedom to maintain freedom. Thus you have the birth of the Marines. Of course, this is just a theory, we don't know that it's true, but thinking about this chapter with this theory in mind makes cross-guild stuff very ironic, and possibly foreshadowing. The meaning of justice has been flipped. Which, to be fair, the Straw Hats have been illustrating this concept from the very beginning. Essentially, there's more than you need to protect the people in more than one way. Anyway, we got a little bit more story between Buggy and with Shanks, and I'm not sure actually how I feel about this part of the chapter, mainly because I'm not sure that I understand it yet. I think we need something from Shanks to justify why, he was on Gold Roger's ship, decided on his own not to visit Laugh-Tale, and then afterwards decided on his own not to pursue the One Piece. And I think it's because he knows what the One Piece is, or what Roger's intentions were for it, or his role in all of this. But we're just kind of waiting for this. But it was interesting to see Buggy's perspective on it. And this, the relationship has totally changed, where now suddenly Buggy was Shanks' fanboy and had every intention of joining Shanks and becoming the next after Roger, and was ultimately betrayed by him with the limited scope and understanding that he had of what was going on and Shanks' intention. In all honesty, it's a massive character moment. Just the same as many current pirate subordinates, Buggy put aside his own dream. Essentially, his dreams were crushed before they even began, simply by seeing Shanks and knowing what he was capable of. Buggy would never measure up to him, therefore could never achieve what it is that he really wanted. Shanks thumbing his nose at it, apparently, is perhaps the ultimate insult. And really, as we sit here now, that's kind of how I've been perceiving Shanks for the last several years. It's like he's a guardian. He's stopping people from achieving their dreams. He's acting as an obstacle with no apparent motive of his own. Although I'm certain that a motive exists. But he's like basically a troll. And when it's actually fleshed out, it makes so much sense, it's absurd. Buggy doesn't need to be the leader, right? He doesn't need to be the captain because he doesn't desire either the fame or the power. He just wants the wealth, and he could achieve this wealth by going with Shanks. We could already have the One Piece by now. I could see how that's incredibly frustrating. But yeah, then we get to the end of the chapter and we get back to the Revolutionary Army. Oda continues his trend of introducing more characters, setting up the Revolutionaries as a faction. I'm totally convinced that the final war is going to center around Laugh-Tale. It's not going to include the 4 Yonko. It's also going to include the Revolutionary Army and the Marines and potentially other factions I'm not thinking of right now. Everyone's going to be there, is my opinion. So the background cast is being drawn. I think that they look really interesting. A side thought that I had is as we're introduced to Vice Captain Ushiano, who is Morley's subordinate, and his proportions remind me a lot of Gecko Moria and a lot of Big News Morgan's. Gecko Moria is a bat, essentially, demon bat. Big News Morgan's is a kind of bird, and this guy is a kind of bull. But because they're all proportionally very similar, I wonder if this is like a race, different from the minks, but also animal-like. But yeah, it's crazy how much personality Oda adds to all of these characters with basically one panel of being present. And I'm pretty sure the dude on the left who was eating the telescope has some fruit that might be similar to Wobble. But the Revolutionary Army absolutely takes the cake as being the faction, the most absurd faction. All their members are just really weird looking, and that's not an insult, I'm just saying that just seems to be what defines them. But yeah, we're following them. They're looking out over the coast as Sabo appears. It turns out that Sabo was not on Lulusia when it was exploded, wasn't able to contact anyone because he did not have a white Dindin Mushi. I think that some people may dislike this. I think that it's a little cheap, it's a cheap thrill, but it's something that Oda commonly does. A lot of stories commonly do to maintain tension from a week-to-week basis. It just is what it is pretty much what I'm saying. But I'm really not that bothered because one way or the other, Sabo had to live. So not being on the island is preferable to tanking whatever the hell happened to the island. And as we already knew, Sabo saw some shit. Something happened, probably regarding Emu. That's my guess, certainly related to Vivi. There's an incredible story there, we already know, and he is likely about to tell it. Although he said, look, if I tell you this, it puts you in danger, which is just incredible. And it just, for me, it only confirms further that this has something to do with Emu. But The details of it, we know something like this occurred. I need the details of it. And unfortunately, Oda was a humongous tease. I hope people aren't mad when I say this, but I have a suspicion, could be wrong, I have a suspicion, we're actually not going to get this answer anytime soon. I think he is just setting up the Revolutionary Army knows something, and when they show up in the story again, then we'll get it. So yeah, I guess if I summed up the chapter at the beginning of this, everything with Cross Guild is about as top tier as it gets. The end with the Revolutionary Army is just, we knew nothing new is here, with the exception of fleshing out their army. It's just building the anticipation for finding out what it is that we don't know yet. But yeah, guys, Egghead is the gift that keeps on giving. I know that a lot of this stuff is not actually taking place on Egghead, but I consider it part of Egghead, and man, we are feasting right now. But curious what you guys think, whether you know something from the chapter that I might have missed. Share your thoughts. Remember to check out my book, The Booms. Volume 1 and 2 is out. Links in the description as well as pinned in the comments. Volume 3 will be out within the next couple months. Be excited for it. And as always, if you do read it, please leave a review and let other people know what you think about it. Kind of like Luffy, I can't achieve my dreams without my crew. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.